Hello, my name's Ella and this is my Flosstube channel Spectrum Stitcher where I talk about my cross stitching and other things that I spend a lot of time doing and thinking about, like my PhD in climate change law and my experiences as a neurodiverse person. Before I go any further, I'd just like to specify that my pronouns are she, her, and I think it's really important that we all normalise sharing our pronouns to make this world a safe and inclusive place for all of us. And I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm filming this video from Waorani country, and that's in Geelong, Victoria, Australia. And the Waorani Nation are an Indigenous nation within Australia, and I want to pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. And I really do encourage you to figure out what Indigenous land you are living on and to learn about that. So, welcome back. If you've watched my videos before, I'm really glad that you've decided to spend some more stitchy time with me. And welcome if you're new. I hope you enjoy what you see and hear. One thing I love about the Flosstube community, as I've said before and will probably say a million times again, is that it's an opportunity to learn from others, whether it's about stitching, whether it's about experiences beyond stitching. It's a community where we all have this common interest of stitching. We can also learn about broader things than stitching within our world, because it puts a group of people together that come from a diverse background but just share a common hobby. So I hope that you find this a place to learn something new as well. So I have to be honest, I've been struggling with when should I film a floss tube, because I've been feeling really sad, like a lot of people in the world at the moment, and I've been feeling overwhelmed. As we all know, there's a war in Ukraine. Russia have invaded Ukraine, and that is devastating, and the people of Ukraine deserve our support and attention. But it's also been making me feel a bit complicated about things, because I think there are a lot of other travesties, human rights abuses, conflicts in other areas of the world that maybe we pay less attention to. And I think that race is often a factor in what information is most prominent in the news. So yeah, it's been... The other thing I feel complicated about is that sometimes for mental health reasons, I have to really limit the amount of information that I take on. And my PhD content, which if you've watched my previous videos, you'll know is about climate change and the contribution of coal to climate change, and how hopefully through a variety of initiatives, coal will be phased out. But a lot of the time it's quite a heavy sort of dire tale of unsuccessful attempts to avert dangerous climate change, with small victories and one step forward and two steps back. And I spent a lot of my time thinking about that and studying that. And also, as a neurodiverse person, I have limited capacity, as neurotypical people do as well, but existing in the world for me is exhausting, because it's a world predominantly made up of neurotypical people and set up for neurotypical people. And so I find existing exhausting. And so because my PhD content is heavy, because my general existence can sometimes be a bit overwhelming, and because I have a duty to make my kids feel like they're being raised in a supportive and safe and secure place. And so I have to maintain energy for that. Sometimes I limit my news intake, and I'm sure a lot of you watching will have reasons why you may limit your news intake, or you might conversely have reasons why you don't, why you feel that you do have capacity to take on all of the world's news and to keep across it and informed. So I've been feeling complicated, because I want to and feel a duty to follow what information we can have about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and to find out what I can do in a small way to contribute to helping those in need in that situation. But I also find doing so exhausting. And I also feel that, I also have a duty to follow other stories in the world of human rights abuses, of conflict, of minorities who are facing injustice. And so I don't have a solution to that, but I just wanted to share with you all that I'm having those complicated feelings. And I was watching Catherine and Victoria on Neat and Not by the Sea the other day, and Catherine actually voiced some complicated feelings she was having about the fact that the Ukraine travesty is so prominent in the news and other abuses and conflicts are less so. And I thought that was very powerful that she shared that. And so I suppose thank you for normalising sharing those complicated feelings, and without diminishing at all the absolute travesty that's going on in Ukraine, and the fact that we should be vigilant about following that as we all, according to our capacity, and contributing in whatever way we can to the effort to support those in Ukraine. So, like many others, I've thought about where I can send my money to support those in need. I've made a donation to the Red Cross in Ukraine, and also following the suggestions of many great Flosstubers, I've done a search on Etsy for shops with PDF cross-stitch patterns in Ukraine, so you can change your filters to find out which shops are in Ukraine, and because they're a PDF and an automatic download, you are transferring money to a shop in Ukraine who there's an automated process for delivering you that PDF, and then that's money straight in their account. So I thought that was a unique way that the cross-stitch community has for getting money on the ground to people who are experiencing conflict in Ukraine. So I've done that as well, and I encourage all of you to consider buying some patterns from someone in Ukraine on Etsy, and think about the ways that you can support people experiencing conflict in Ukraine, but in other places in the world, and other minorities in society who experience injustice and discrimination on a daily basis. Another response that I want to have is, I suppose, mindful of the fact of how heavy a lot of this information is, and also to amplify. So I want to talk about something positive and something to be celebrated. And I also want to amplify a story of Indigenous victory over, the vested interests in this world. So usually at the start of my cross stitch, before I get into a bit of stitching, which is the main event here, I do talk about things I've discovered in my PhD recently. And so I want to use this segment of my cross stitch today to amplify a story of Indigenous victory over vested interests. So a bit of background. Recently I've been writing a chapter for my PhD thesis focusing on whether there are human rights pathways for halting coal extraction and consumption in Australia. So recently, in 2019, Queensland passed a Human Rights Act, which includes rights for Queenslanders, including the right to life. And now we have our first instance of climate change litigation, so a climate change court case being brought in opposition to a coal mine, but the argument in that case is based on human rights. And so I've been looking into what avenues we have in Australia for other litigation of that nature, and been thinking about rights discourses in general. So there are human rights, but then I also came across something adjacent to that about rights of nature, so human rights are invested in all human beings, and they're universal. And but now we've got that's a very anthropocentric or human-focused way of looking at the world. And so we've got this movement of rights for nature where we are vesting or acknowledging rights in nature. So the Yarra River has been vested with rights in Victoria, Australia, and in Ecuador, in the constitution, Mother Nature herself has been given legal personhood and vested with rights, and they're called Pachamama. And please forgive any poor pronunciation in this video, and educate me on that poor pronunciation if you're in the know. This is a story that I'm about to tell you about the positive inroads we're seeing being made in relation to rights for nature. We don't have legislation or constitutional recognition of rights for nature in Australia at a national level. As I did say, we do have some examples, like at the Victorian state level, we've got a federation here, so I'm hopefully not getting too complicated, but we've got a national government and some state governments. So we have recognition of the rights of the Yarra River, which is in Victoria at a Victorian state level, but we don't have a national constitutionally recognised or national legislation recognised rights for nature in Australia. But I suppose when I was thinking about the Australian context, I came across other contexts in which these rights do exist. So today's story takes us to Ecuador and to the constitutionally enshrined rights there of Pachamama, rights for nature. And, if you feel like Googling the Republic of Ecuador's constitution, have a look at Articles 10, 71, 72 and 73. And what you see there is rights vested in nature that, it's quite revolutionary really, because it is moving away from an anthropocentric or human-focused way of thinking and, putting humankind within a broader context of our environment that we live in. And it's very different from a Western way of thinking, and it is actually advancing Indigenous cultures' ways of thinking in Ecuador. And so Indigenous populations in Ecuador have successfully won a court case in Ecuador's highest court, based using those articles in their constitution about the rights for nature to halt mining in the Amazon. So it's in the Los Cedros region of the protected region of the Amazon that this case has been won. And I've got some notes here just so that I don't give inaccurate information, but please do check the description box below, because I've collated quite a list of links for anyone interested to do some further reading on this. But the Indigenous population of the Kofán people, and they've successfully won this court case in Ecuador to stop mining leases, to remove mining leases in an area of Amazon rainforest, which is biodiverse and rich in both biodiversity and Indigenous culture and practices. And I also just wanted to please do have a link in the description box below, but Nemonte Nenquimo, who is a Waorani Indigenous leader, she is just a phenomenal woman and climate activist, and she posts quite a bit about this case and other legal battles being fought in relation to the Amazon. So I encourage you to follow her Instagram. Please check the description box below for her details. And also she gave a fantastic TED talk explaining her connection and the connection of her people to the forest, and why taking climate action to avoid dangerous climate change is so vital. So I just wanted to share a positive story of Indigenous victory over mining interests in the Amazon. I think it's important to amplify those stories because they don't necessarily come up first in our newsfeed. And I hope this story gives you some energy to realise that there are people out there who are defending what is good, and encourages you to, in your own way, think about how you can also be a person like that, or support others like that. So anyway, that's my spotlight. Hopefully I'm not too muddled today. As I said, I'm feeling sad and I'm feeling overwhelmed, and I didn't think I could film a Flosstube, but I thought it's important to still share and still be open to connecting with others when you're not feeling, and I'm not feeling at my best, because I think it's honest, and it's vulnerable, and it's a way that we can connect, and yeah, more honestly. And I think it's important to normalize that it's okay to not feel upbeat and happy all the time. So the other thing I usually do before I talk about some stitching, and I will move to some stitching quite shortly, but I like to share anything I've learnt about my autism recently. And I attended a fantastic webinar by Atwood and Garnett about neurodiversity and romantic relationships. I think there's going to be a book published about that, so keep your eye out for that. And also have a look at the Atwood and Garnett website for any future events. It was fantastic. I highly recommend it to anyone with an interest in autism, who is autistic, who's supporting someone who's autistic, who might be in a neurodiverse relationship. And neurodiverse can mean ADD, ADHD. It's not just autism. And, you know, diagnosed or undiagnosed as well. There are lots of people who have autism who I'd self-identify as autistic or neurodiverse, who haven't got a formal assessment, who that information would be still as useful for. But they mentioned a book, and it's called Spectrum Women, Autism and Parenting. And have a look in the description box. I've included the details of where that can be purchased and the authors in the description box below. I haven't read the book yet, but it definitely piqued my interest. It's something I'm going to be getting and having a read of as soon as I can. And something that I have been digesting already is a podcast that I came across recently. And I came across it because Atwood and Garnett spoke at an episode, but I was delighted to find that there's a backlog of about 3 seasons worth of podcast episodes. And the podcast is called Neurodiverse Love. So it's been delightful to find a community of people speaking about neurodiversity and romantic relationships. That's something that I'm obviously trying to navigate myself. But I think it's an interesting thing for anyone to open their mind to understanding. So yeah, I encourage you to have a listen. I've found it to be thoroughly enjoyable and supportive and interesting. So on to some stitching. So I usually show a previous finish, and eventually I'm going to run out of those. But for now, because I've been stitching for, a couple of years before I started filming Flosstubes, I can show you a few previous finishes. Now in Flosstube number 3, which was last time, probably should have specified this is Flosstube 4, I showed my finish, which I had framed, of Garden Cat by Satsuma St. I have another finished stitch in that series called Cactus Cat by Satsuma St. It's finished, it's not yet framed, and I'd like to get this framed for one of my children's birthdays in April. We'll see how I go because it's quite expensive, but I'll share it with you now. So here it is. See if I can get it all in frame. It's quite big. This is Cactus Cat by Satsuma St. And as always with Satsuma St designs, I'm in love with the colours. That sort of yucca flower, the big curving flower with the bird on top of it, that was really confetti heavy, as we say. So lots of sort of pixelated changes in colour. Made me go cross-eyed a few times because a lot of the shades, I'll just see if I can zoom in for you, are very similar in that flower. So that was probably my least favourite part of the stitch. I really enjoyed the sort of tonal terracotta pots and the geometric patterns in those pots. And I liked this purple cactus here. And the cat, of course. And what I'm proud about myself with this stitch is that this cat, you will see, has whiskers and they are back stitched. But when I did Garden Cat, which I showed you last time, I didn't feel confident enough in my back stitching to complete the back stitch. I had a go at it and ripped it out because I thought it didn't do justice to my cross stitch, which I felt I was happy with. And so I left the whiskers off. And so when I look at the Garden Cat framed in my child's room, sometimes I think, if only I just persisted with that back stitch. And other times I think, well, it'll be nice to have this one, Cactus Cat, framed and put next to it and with its back stitch that I'm very happy with, to see that I've had some personal growth with my stitching. So that's my previous finish. And next, I'm very excited to share with you that I have a finish that I've done this month. But just to keep you on your toes, I will talk about my backdrop today, which I hopefully am not blending too much in with. I tried to go a bit of tone on tone. Hopefully I don't look like a floating head to you. But this behind me is a vintage bed sheet that I got from an op shop for $1. Now, any of you who follow my friend Catherine at Neat and Not by the Sea will know that that's something she loves to do, is to snap up vintage sheets at op shops. And this just shows to me that we were destined to be friends, Catherine, because I picked this up, I think, about, 6 years ago at an op shop. So I love picking up vintage sheets as well. My intention with this one was to cut it up and change it into a quilt. I've not done that yet, but it's in my stash ready to go. It is, though, in quite good nick. Maybe I should just use it as a bed sheet for a while before I then repurpose it. But I'm very happy to give you a flower power backdrop today. And I just love these mustardy yellow 70s tones. And I love they look like zinnias, and yeah, they just make me feel bright and happy. So I'm hoping that my background will lift my mood and lift your mood. But yeah, that's what's behind me today, because I know a few of you like to know. My backdrops seem to be becoming a bit of a thing, and it's really just to save you from the boring Venetian blinds behind me. But without further ado, I'm very proud to share with you that I've had a finish this month. And what's even more awesome about it is that it was my new year, new start for 2022. And yeah, we're in early March now. And I have finished it because I got obsessed with it and could not put it down. And also I've noticed that when I become stressed and overwhelmed, I'm really productive in my cross stitch, probably less so in other areas of my life. I wish I could pick and choose what I'm the most productive in when I'm stressed, but my cross stitch is a very important part of grounding me and revitalizing my energy and keeping me going. So I'm going to try not to be too hard on myself. But anyway, here it is, Otono from Satsuma St. Not ironed, but hot off the press. I am so proud of this finish. Thank you to Catherine from Neat and Not by the Sea, who, when I put out a poll for what I should stitch on for my new year, new start, she was the one and only vote for Otono, this piece by Satsuma St. And I'm so glad she chose it, because this is a piece that before I took up cross stitching, I saw on Etsy in Satsuma St's shop, fell in love with because I love the retro hues, and thought, no, I will never be able to stitch that. That is too big. I would be buying supplies that, I'd be wasting because I wouldn't be able to do justice to it. My stitching wouldn't be good enough, or I'd leave it unfinished. And I'm so proud of myself that I've finally given it a go and I've completed it. And it's really given me self-confidence to back myself in and just do the things that I feel like doing. And it's okay to let projects go sometimes, and sometimes you won't let them go and you'll be obsessed with them and you will have such joy out of it. And yeah, instead of just looking at something wishing that I'd done it, I've actually done it. It's only taken me, 8 years from maybe first seeing it. I'm not sure when the date of this actually was. Maybe it's not that old, but it's been years and years from seeing this to even purchasing it and then stitching it. So I'm so happy to have this, and I'm looking forward to having it framed. I did this with all the called for DMC because I would not touch Satsuma St's colours. She's a colour master. Jody at Satsuma St. Which was my favourite motif to stitch? Well, that's a really tricky question that I'm sure some of you might have in your brain. I think before I stitched this pattern, what attracted me were the mushrooms and the apple. I loved stitching the apple because I could outline. I did the outline in this red, rust sort of red colour. Then I put in the central sort of cream and the pips and the core. And then I just filled in the mustard colour. That was fun to do. This bird, I fell in love with this bird. It is just so cute. I love the colours. I love the curled over on itself sort of shape. And I think I'd actually love to stitch it again, maybe on the hemline of a denim skirt or some flared jeans. So hopefully, I've never stitched on clothing before, but that's something I'd love to do. And I think it would be really cute to have this guy traveling along a hem. Maybe accompanied by this bird down the bottom, who was also a joy to stitch. And this piece has become even more special to me because one of my children asked if they could help me. And so they helped me with a few stitches of this gorgeous hot pink squirrel. They also helped me with some stitches in this bird. And some of the pumpkin. And it means I will also need to give this one a little wash before I have it framed. Because as it turns out, when you're focusing really hard on figuring out which hole to put the needle through, sometimes you can forget to control other parts of your body and you might dribble all over the piece. Just to be clear, I'm not talking about myself dribbling. I have not to date dribbled on my cross stitch, but my little one dribbled, which it's lovely to have on here, but I think, I don't know if over time that would yellow or something. So I've got the gorgeous memory of them helping me to stitch this. And they asked, maybe 3 or 4 days in a row, they'd see me stitching with this and they'd come up and say, Mummy, can I do a stitch or two? So this now is one of my most treasured pieces. And have a look over on Instagram because I documented some of this piece as I stitched motif by motif and also when my little one was helping me too. So have a look at Ella Rose Vines. It's in the description box below if you'd like to follow step by step what my journey was with this piece as well. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have that done. And there are 3 other patterns in that series, one for each other season of the year. And this one, Otono, was for autumn, was definitely the one that called to me the most. But I would like to stitch the others so that I can change out the piece as the seasons change. I think I might make some modifications to the other patterns, maybe using some other Satsuma St motifs from some of her other designs to sub in but keep the colour palette. So I've been having lots of thinking about how I might personalise those. But yeah, when I start them, I will definitely bring you along for the journey. But I haven't kitted up. I've got the patterns, but I haven't kitted any of them up. I haven't gathered the supplies. For anyone who's not a cross stitcher who's watching this, which is probably just very supportive members of my family who don't cross stitch but watch me because they're lovely. Kitting up refers to gathering cross stitch supplies and putting it with a pattern. So getting your fabric, your thread or floss, and your pattern all together so that you've got a kit to then stitch from. So I haven't kitted any of the others up yet. I do have the patterns. But yeah, I think I'm definitely doing a stitch what you want when you want sort of vibe at the moment. So we'll see when the mood takes me in that direction and I'll definitely keep you informed. So now on to works in progress. So this month, I really spent a lot of time stitching on Otono, and that's how I managed to get that done. But I've been using my tracker from Bespoke Letterpress to keep track of things, and yeah, it's mainly Otono. But I also did a couple of other things. Most of my plans went out the window, but that's, the best plans are for flexible, and definitely cross-stitching for me is about trying to be flexible. I'm dropping things everywhere, so we'll see how we go with that. But the first thing I would like to mention is actually on the floor over there. So hold please while I get it. Of course it's the thing that fell. So I'm back. Last Flosstube I mentioned that I'd been inspired by Catherine at Neat and Knot by the Sea, and she was stitching Rosewood Manor and DeForest Grew, and I had the pattern and I asked her if she would like to do a stitch along with me, and she said yes. And she was stitching and DeForest Grew from the flosses that she had in stash and choosing her colours as she went along. And that felt like a very vulnerable thing for me to give a go, because I like to follow patterns to the letter, and have only very recently, as you'll have seen in my last episode, started experimenting with changing things up with either design or colour. I did that with my Valentine's Day conversion of a Barbara Anna design. And so have a look at Flosstube 3 if you're interested in that and haven't seen it already. So I decided that I would try to stitch and DeForest Grew with what I have in stash. And what I have in stash is the threads that I have been collecting from my Stitch in Time, from my Threads Club, from a Stitch in Time in Hobart. And so I just pulled all of the sort of greens and browns that I had in stash, and I'm going to be pulling from these the colours that I like as I go along with the pattern. And yeah, so we've created the hashtag with what you have, Sal. That's in the description box below if you'd like to join along. And for some reason, I've just discovered that my pattern has been and my stitch have been separated from where I've been keeping my floss. So hold please for a moment, and I'll just go and grab my very meagre start on Rosewood Manors and DeForest Grew. So I'm now back with pattern in hand. So here is the pattern, and DeForest Grew by Rosewood Manor. So it's this beautiful forest with trees. And it does have a verse in the center here, which I think I would like to replace. At the moment, I'm thinking about maybe charting or using birds that I have from other patterns and filling this tree with beautiful, colorful birds. Because I tend to prefer cross-stitch patterns without verses on them. I imagine if I had a verse on my cross-stitch patterns, it would have to be one that has huge personal significance to me, and I haven't really been able to think of such a verse for myself at the moment. So at the moment, the current plan is to hopefully fill this tree in the center with a rainbow of birds. So our With What You Have, Sal, is not only encouraging me to be out of my comfort zone by stitching not with the call for colours on the pattern, but also for me to focus, the intention I'm entering into it with is to focus on being a bit more sustainable with my stitching and using what I have to hand rather than buying new supplies. And as you'll see, you know, I do really enjoy gathering new supplies, but I knew with my Threads in Time club that I had a whole lot of beautiful flosses that would be great for this project, and so I wanted to be brave enough to use them. And Catherine from Neat and Knot is someone who really inspires me to think about my consumerism, and obviously I'm surrounded every day by people who help me to think about consumerism and sustainability through my PhD on climate change. Yeah, I just think it's a good little challenge for myself, and I encourage you to join us at the hashtag. And it's sort of a choose your own adventure sort of thing. There's not necessarily a time frame. I think we'll be stitching on it for the rest of the year and posting our progress. I doubt I'm going to finish it by the end of the year, as you'll see in a moment, by my meagre start. And, you know, Catherine and I are engaging with this stitch along with the intention of trying to be more sustainable in our stitching. But you could engage with it with another thought in mind, another challenge in mind, or just because you have this pattern, we'd love for you to join us. Now, I'm stitching this with fibre on a whim linen, and I've never stitched on linen before. It is a 32 count, and it's called Cream and Sugar, and it is like a bed sheet. This pattern is so huge that you need a bed sheet sized linen to stitch it on, but it is a beautiful colour. It is very crinkled because I stitch in hand, and I'm trying to find where my start is on this because that is how small my start is. Here we go. Hopefully you can see that. So I stitched a little tree. As Catherine terms it, it's the wonky tree. I have not completed stitching the wonky tree yet, but for having just started stitching on linen for the first time ever, it took me quite a long time, and I learnt two things. I'm going to have to be patient with myself because it will be slow for a while, but also I need good lighting. I think I was doing this late at night with my bedside lamp, and I think some daylight on the subject would have been really helpful. And I might even think about some magnification. But I was really happy. Like, I managed to be able to see the holes, the stitching on linen started to become logical in my brain. I was happy with the colours that I chose, and that they, random, but they still look pleasing together, which I suppose you can't go too wrong with a tree. You choose a green, you choose a brown. But I'm happy with how it's looking so far. So this is going to be a long-term project for me, but one that I'm very glad to be doing in community with my friend Catherine. And yeah, I'd like our community of this little cell to grow. So if you're interested, join us. We'd love to have you. All right, so that was my whip, and it was also a start this month and a forest grew. Here are the flosses that I used so far to stitch that little tree. Cappuccino by Classic Colour Works, which goes from a milky brown to a more of a coffee brown. That makes sense. I mean, it looks like the stuff on top of a cappuccino mixed with the cappuccino. Very descriptive today, I know. And English Ivy, also by Classic Colour Works. It's a beautiful, beautiful green. It just speaks to me so much. So that's English Ivy. Okay, so on to my next whip. What else did I stitch on this month? As I said, not many other things because I spent so long on Otono. But I also started, and I've sort of given you a bit of out of order sort of sequence here, but hey, it's my Flosstube and I'll do what I want. But in preparation for stitching on linen for the first time, I wanted to try stitching on Evenweave. So I'm sure as the familiar cross stitchers watching this Flosstube will be aware, stitching on Ada is very different from stitching on the one Ada on the one hand is very different from stitching on Evenweave or linen on the other. So with Ada, it's you're doing a cross in a grid of 4 holes. So there's 4 points that you're making your cross from. But with Evenweave or linen, it's a box of 9 holes. So if you're doing over 2 stitching, if you're doing over 1, it's more like the Ada again. But you're on linen or Evenweave. That's very bad description, but I do encourage you to, if you're new to cross stitching, have a Google of some other Flosstubers to learn about that. The Steel City Stitches did some fantastic tutorials about how to stitch on linen and Evenweave, and Elizabeth Ann Can Stitch was also very useful with her how to stitch in hand on linen tutorial. So anyway, so the difference between Evenweave and linen is that Evenweave is a sort of processed and manufactured, sort of less natural cloth, and for that reason it doesn't have any sort of imperfections in it. Whereas linen, it's finer, and it also has things called slubs. So it has variation in the thread thickness and some imperfections called slubs, which means that sometimes you're stitching over a thicker thread or a thinner thread, and so it can be a little bit more difficult to adjust for that and to see where your holes are. But whereas with Evenweave, you don't have that. So I thought it would be good to practice on some Evenweave before I went to linen. And I to date have exclusively stitched on Ada. So I pulled out this kit from Nikka Moscow. Nikka Moscow collaborate with Barbara Anna, who, as you know, I absolutely love, and they put together some exclusive kits. So I got the duo of the mushrooms and the moths. I do encourage you to have a look in the description box below and go and have a look at Nikka Moscow. Not sponsored at all, but they have better photos of these patterns than I have here. These kits just come with sort of a small cover photo like this. So this is the mushrooms and this is the moths, and I just really want to stitch the moths because I love the idea of the irony of that I don't want any real moths anywhere near my stitching. So I just love the idea of stitching moths, and I'm also fascinated with insects and mushrooms and all things botanical, and so yeah, I have a lot of mushroom charts, I have a lot of birds, I have a lot of insects and butterflies and flowers, and I would love to cover every single wall in my house with those things. Anyway, so I started the moths. So this is the one that I started. It's a very meager start. These kits, not only do they come in a cute tube, they come with the fabric to the right size, they come with a needle, they come with how to cross stitch instructions, they come with a pattern, and they come with all of the floss that you need. I'll just see if I can find the floss. So they actually come braided, but then you unbraid them. But they come in this sort of thread keep, and it's got all the symbols that you would then use from the pattern. So it's DMC floss. And this was just one night of practicing of how to stitch on Evenweave. So it's not much to write home about yet, but I was delighted with it because it was me learning a new skill. And there you have it. And this is something that I'd like to do more of now, particularly now that I've finished Otono. Although I have realized that this month I stuck with Otono, but after I finished that, it's just been a free-for-all in terms of just not really being able to stick with any one thing. And that's just because, I think I'm feeling that I just want to use my cross stitch as an outlet to have fun and relax and to not have rules and discipline around at the moment. That then led me to start another new start. So I've had 3 new starts since I finished Otono. And the next one is an Emily Peacock designed DMC kit. There are 4 in this series, all of different botanical sort of curations. I've got them all. I'm intending to stitch them all. They're absolutely beautiful. And I love that they're quite textured. So I'm not sure if you can see from this cover photo, but there'll be French knots on layered over cross stitch and quite a lot of back stitch layered over cross stitch. See this back stitch here. This chart in particular, I think the thing I'm most looking forward to is stitching this pine cone, because that just looks like geometric sort of delight to me. I'm very nervous about trying French knots. I've never done that before, and also to sort of taking my back stitch to a very textural level rather than just a little accent here or there will be a challenge for me, but I'm looking forward to it. So we'll see how I go with that. And here's my start. This came with a DMC on pre-sorted. So here are the colours, and my threads are, a bit disorganised, but not disorganised, but not neat and tidy, but that's okay. So it's a beautiful rainbow of colours. And here is my start. It's on the kit Ada. It's a 14 count Ada. And I've been stitching in hand. It's very crunchy Ada, but sometimes that's quite nice to have something quite firm. So I've started with this flower. There's another bud still to go here. But then I got bored, so I moved on to this next motif, which I've outlined and now I'm filling in. And this flower will have backstitch going this way over it and then French knots up here. And this will have backstitch sort of the veins of the leaves put in. And I'm not sure whether I will backstitch as I go or backstitch at the end. I suppose I'll just sort of do it as the fancy takes me. But I'm very excited to have started this. This was another stitch that I thought, no, I'm not going to be good enough to start. I felt even embarrassed that I'd collected it because I was like, well, I'm never going to be good enough to do it. And so why did I spend money on it? But I think it's just about taking the plunge and giving these things a go and enjoying the process. And I'm definitely really enjoying this process so far. So yeah, and you know, I picked it up and I couldn't put it down because I'm really happy with the amount of progress I've made, probably in about, I don't know, 3 days. Probably because I've been doing more stitching than sleeping. That's not true, but yeah, I've definitely been finding it difficult to put down when it's time to sleep. But yeah, I've been loving it and enjoying it, and that's what cross stitching is all about, really, isn't it? Okay, so they're my whips for this month. Let's talk about Save the Stitches. So for those of you who are new here, I've been inspired by other Flosstubers such as Kathleen at Situation Normal and Amanda May at Artist Design, who like to go to op shops or thrift stores, antique stores, and give new homes to other people's beautiful hand stitching. And yeah, I love finding things and then giving them a new, you know, because I cherish them. So this time it's a bit different in that I haven't found anything in an antique store, but my mum and stepdad are moving house, and everyone, as tends to happen, was storing things in their shed. So me and my siblings, as well as they, had a lot of stuff in their shed too, and so we all had to go and sort our stuff out. And so I sorted all of my stuff out, which was overwhelming process, but has made me realize that, you know, I've got a lot of supplies and things that I should either use or pass on. And so I found something that I'd started myself years ago and had forgotten about, which I'll show you in a moment. But I also found some stitching from my stepdad's mum, Veronica, and I asked if I could borrow it for this floss tube and then return it to my stepdad because it's, you know, something he treasures and is beautiful, but I thought I'd like to share it with you as an example of amazing handiwork. So here it is. It's a beautiful framed piece. It's a beautiful bird. It looks like, I don't know, maybe a kingfisher or a kookaburra, but Kate, who's my dad's partner, if you're watching, maybe you can tell me what it is. You're the bird expert that I know. She takes beautiful photography of birds. But it's needlepoint, I think. So it seems to be done in wool. And it's just, I think it's the sweetest, most beautiful piece. I love the very calm, sort of natural muted colours. And yeah, she's also signed the back of it, and I think she's framed it herself because she's folded over the needlepoint canvas and backed it with some paper and some tape. But yeah, what a sweet little piece. So I thought I'd like to share it with you so that we could all celebrate Veronica's beautiful work. She's no longer with us, but I think, yeah, we should celebrate the hours of love that someone has put into their work. Veronica's put into her work. So that's the Save the Stitches, which, you know, I'm hoping that Mum and Rog will not put in a shed again and put on a wall because, yeah, should be enjoyed. I probably shouldn't judge you like that. If they want to keep it in a shed, it's theirs. They can do with it what they will. But yeah, now at least it's been immortalised on the YouTube interwebs for all time for us to enjoy. The other thing is that I found, and it's not really a Save the Stitches because it's my own work, but it is something that I had long forgotten. And I sort of I remembered that my gran, who you might have seen in my Flosstube special edition a couple of videos ago, check that out if you haven't. It was a lovely chat that we had about her stitching journey. She taught me how to embroider as a little girl, and that I didn't really continue with it. But then when I found that I was pregnant with my first child, I decided I wanted to embroider something. And all of this has completely slipped my mind because I think in my first Flosstube I was telling you how I was going to give embroidery a go for the first time as an adult with that little panda from Kiriki Press that I started. But no, I remembered, like, I found this bag and all of a sudden, it's a project bag, and all of a sudden I remember what was going to be in it, and this memory flooded back of this project that I had started when I found out that I was going to become a mum. And the intention was to have this be a frame piece in my baby's room. I never got to that point, but I think now I would like to finish it off and either put it in my growing up child's room or maybe in my own room, because I think it's a message that I would like. So I got a quote that I know was used in Dr. Seuss. I'm not sure if it was originally there. And the quote is, "Today you are you, that is truer than true. There is no one alive who is youer than you." And I just wanted to have those words, and I wanted to just choose some floss that I liked. And so I've just, printed it out using font and then have traced it onto some calico and chosen what floss colours I will use. And then I've had a practice on some calico, and obviously I went to my gran for help to ask her how to do this, because she's written on this calico, stem stitch, point needle up, chain stitch, point needle down. So that's very special to have actually her handwriting telling me what to do. And then you can see that we've done some practice to refresh my memory of what to do. So I've been doing some chain stitch and some lazy daisies here. And then I've practiced the word you. And yeah, I've done some stem stitch on that U and then some chain stitch. And I think what I decided was that I might like to do chain stitch for all of it, because here is it's still in a hoop, which I won't take it out for now, but I got up to, I did the "today you are you, that is truer than true, there is and it's been crinkled away in a shed for, 7 or 8 years. But I looked at it and I thought, that's not terrible. I don't mind the colours I chose. They're bright, they're happy. I don't mind. My stitches are sufficiently neat to be happy with. The back is atrocious. I can live with that. And I think that this is a message that I should either put up in my kids' rooms or put above my desk, because what a great time to rediscover this message for myself. And yeah, so as it turns out, I have given embroidery a red hot go before, and I'd like to finish that off. So I suppose maybe rather than a save the stitches, this is the resurrection of a UFO or an unfinished object back into a, give it a new life. So it looks like I was using DMC thread for this, but it looks like I'm using the pearl thread. So I've got, you know what, that's not true. I found this in the shed and now I've grabbed these to use in other projects. But the threads that I'm using for this project, so I've just shoved it in the bag and then forgotten that I've done that, seem to be, regular DMC. So I've long since removed the floss colours. So obviously, and I've, mangled them all into a ball. But you know what? This deserves to be finished and celebrated, I think. So that's what I'm going to do. If the discipline strikes me. But, it's good to rediscover this, and I think it would be nice. It would be very nice to finish that off. Okay, so now let's move into the whole segment. So I was scrolling through Instagram as you do, and it's such a fantastic source, as we all know, of inspiration for whatever your interests are. But obviously, if you're watching this, ours is cross stitch, and I came across Gerda Bengston, who is a Danish designer, and seems to have been very popular. I'm not sure if they're still producing patterns, but was producing in the 1960s. And so I had seen someone stitch a dandelion, and even though they're a weed here in Australia, you do see them sort of popping up in nature strips. And my children and I, when we see them and walk along, my children like to make a wish on the dandelion by blowing on its seed head and dispersing them and creating more weeds. But for me and for my children, it's become a very important message to take time to stop and enjoy small things, and to notice the small things, and to take joy in those things. During the COVID lockdowns, when we would go on our walks, we would keep our eyes out for dandelions and stop and blow on them. And earlier than that, when we've been through difficult times, one of my children stopped and blew on a dandelion, and one of my brothers took a photo of that, and it became a treasured possession. And then I have a photo of my other child blowing on a dandelion during one of our walks in the lockdowns. And so I've printed a photo of each of them at a similar age blowing on a dandelion, making a wish. And so when I saw this cross stitch of a dandelion, it made me want to figure out where I could get that pattern so I could stitch a dandelion and display it with those photographs of my children. So I found out that this was a Gerda Benston design, and so I tracked down a reprint of some of her vintage floral designs in this book. So here is the dandelion here, and stitched up. I mean, these photos don't really do them justice stitched up on Instagram. This looks amazing. And there's several other patterns in here I would like to stitch. And I just got this on Book Depository for a very reasonable price. And the description box has those details below. I won't show you, but the challenge will be that they are, sort of photocopied, hand-drawn patterns. And so they are a little bit, they're not as clear as the patterns I've become accustomed to stitching from more modern patterns, and particularly PDFs. So, they're all black and white. They're all hand-drawn. It'll be a nice challenge. But I feel that I'm up to it. And they're very precious patterns to have. So I sort of kept going down that rabbit hole of trying to track down any of Gerda's patterns that I could find. And I came across, I discovered that in Denmark, there would be printed each year from the Embroidery Guild a calendar with a pattern each month to stitch. And so on Etsy, I found a vintage, in fantastic condition calendar from 1966, which has some of Gerda Bengston's, all of the patterns this year, in that year, were by Gerda Bengston, and they're these floral designs that I love. Have a look in the description box below for the details of that Etsy seller. But isn't this the sweetest thing? I mean, I'm just happy to have this in my possession, whether I stitched from it or not, as just an antique to have. I love collecting things, and so collecting vintage cross-stitch patterns seems to be my latest thing. But I also absolutely love every single design in here, and I haven't stitched any from them yet because I was thinking that maybe next year it might be nice to stitch one a month. I was very inspired by Amanda, who is Alba Stitcher on Flosstube, when she did a blackbird design stocking per month for 2021. And I just thought, given this as a calendar, this would be very well suited to stitching one thing a month. So I might like to do that for 2023. Having said that, I don't want to put pressure on myself about it, because that would probably be counterintuitive to getting anything stitched. So if I want to stitch something earlier, I will. But no, I am tempted to give that a go as next year's major project for me. The reason that I was particularly delighted to track this one down is because of these beautiful snowdrops. Because I saw them stitched on Instagram by a Japanese stitcher. And I thought I need that pattern, so I'm very glad to have tracked it down. I'll just show you a couple of other ones that look particularly gorgeous. This daffodil, I'm really looking forward to stitching. I think that would be lovely displayed as a spring piece. I'd probably have it out for Easter too. So Easter in the Southern Hemisphere isn't our springtime, it's our autumn time. But, you know, I think our Easter displays are often, you know, influenced by the Northern Hemisphere. So you will see, you know, rabbits and blossoms and chickens and all the things that you get in spring displayed at our Easter, if you did have Easter decorations. So I probably would, if I stitch this, put this up at Easter, but then also at springtime. I'm very keen to have a bit of an Easter display. So yeah, I'm very, very tickled to have this gorgeous little, like, it's quite small, but what a prized treasure to have in my stash. Okay, so I also got my Floss of the Month club from a stitching time in Hobart. Excuse the crinkles, but I'll open them now. So this was my Gentle Arts threads that I get as part of that club. If I can figure out how to open the packet, that would be good. You can tell I'm tired when I can no longer figure out how to open a packet. There we go. I think the lighting in here is it was camouflaging the seam of the packet. All right, so here's the Gentle Arts threads. We have Huckleberry, which I didn't know that huckleberries would be blue. Are huckleberries even a berry, or is it just a reference to Huckleberry Finn? Probably the latter. Beautiful clear blue, sky blue. Honeydew, which is like a honeydew melon, the flesh of a honeydew melon. Hollyberry. Highland and Heather. Feel like maybe the colours aren't picking up that well on that one, but it's a beautiful colour. It's very soft, sort of pinky mauve, dusty pink. Hibiscus. And Harvest Moon, which I feel like I might have a skein of from when I did my advent calendar. It's going very well with my background today. We're teaming with the theme. Okay, and here are the classic Colourworks threads that I got. Try not to have the same problem with opening the packet. Okay, so Fleur de Lilac. Beautiful lilac colour. That's the name there. How beautiful is that? Then we have a Fool's Gold, which is also teaming particularly well with my background today. And it actually has some very pale bone sort of colour in it as well. I'm not sure. I think you can see that. There you go. So it's got gold and bone, which would be a really cool variegated colour to use. Fallen Leaves. Beautiful autumnal rust orange. Fancy Green Nancy. Yes, Nancy, I do fancy green. It's beautiful pastel. And then Finley Gold. So all the golden hues. There's the name. And here it's more of a sort of lolly banana yellow, this one. Bit deeper than a lolly banana. Or in New Zealand, what is the chocolates you have? Perky nanas. I love those. I wish I could get them here. I've been to New Zealand before, and yeah, if I could have brought a suitcase back of Perky nanas, I would have. There you have it. Okay, and then I got my fabric of the month. I just got a low power mode notification on my phone, so another interruption hopefully didn't cut me off. I got my fabric of the month from Fox and Rabbit, so I get a 32 count fat quarter, and this month it's called Pink Salt Lake, and it is just beautiful. It's got that pink of the sort of Himalayan sort of rock salt lamps that you get, right? Or the pink salt that you can get, we can at least get at the supermarket here. For the salt grinder, and also a beautiful warm brown as well. So it's very hard to pick it up on camera, but it's just divine. So yes, very delighted to be part of that club. Now, do I have anything else in haul to show you? Yes, I do. And then I also realized that I missed a whip, so a work in progress, so we're going to have to backtrack a little bit, but I'm sure you'll forgive me. I picked myself up a sweet little pair of embroidery scissors from the Strawberry Thief. So they've put this lovely little piece of Liberty of London fabric on it, but from the Strawberry Thief in Western Australia. I love their online shop. And it's probably quite apt that I'm showing you these beautiful embroidery scissors before I show you my work in progress I forgot to show you, which is my quilting work in progress, which is my hexagon quilt that I'm using Liberty of London fabrics, which I get from the Strawberry Thief in Western Australia. So I had a lovely crafternoon with my Auntie Kathy this month, and it was just the most warm and chatty and fun time to spend with her. She fosters kittens, and so there were a whole lot of cute little kittens to cuddle, and you know, she provided lovely nibblies, and yeah, we just had a wonderful time catching up after what felt like ages during these, you know, after these couple of years of lack of connection with friends and family. I come from a very tight-knit family, and so, you know, we had Zooms and stuff over COVID, but it's just not the same as being able to catch up in person. So being able to sit in her house and talk with her, and she's a great inspiration to me because she's completed a PhD, and so we were able to talk shop in that regard of, you know, how do you keep going when it gets hard and things like that. I also really look up to her as a feminist, and she's a wonderful mother, and gives great relationship advice and is the least judgmental person I know. So I just had a wonderful afternoon, and so now I'm really glad that I got to spend some time stitching my hexagon quilt, because I will hopefully always remember that I was stitching on this block or flower, hexagon flower, while I was sitting having a crafternoon with her. But yeah, I didn't think I could count and stitch at the same time, so I decided to work on my quilt rather than my cross stitch. And it was interesting actually, because I had, this wasn't exactly I tend to piece together the colours I'm going to put together and put a little clip on them, a wonder clip, and then I stitch them together later, because I love, just as a separate activity, putting together my colour choices. This wasn't exactly what I had in mind, so this wasn't part of it. There was one that was similar to this that I wanted in this flower, and then I wanted to have as the centre of the flower this, but I had these three stitched, these four stitched, and then I sat down to stitch, completely forgot what bit I was joining to where, and started joining up here as though this was the centre. So I had to sort of rethink the way I was going to do this, and so I added in this, which is the same print as this but a different tone. I thought that worked because there is some mauve, smallest amount of mauve in there, and it also picks up on these blues. So yeah, I think it's beautiful, and I love the memory that I now have attached to it. That was my other work in progress I wanted to share with you. Okay, so what do I want to say? I just want to say a few sort of closing little shout outs and things, and then I'll let you be on your merrily stitchy way to the next Flosstube video or to whatever else you want to do next in your day. I would usually talk about plans, but I think at the moment having hard and fast cross-stitching plans really isn't the mode that I'm sort of in. I've got some deadlines coming up with my PhD and things like that, and you know, lots of other pressures on, and so I just want to stitch for joy and pick up what I want to pick up and feel motivated to pick up in an evening when I get to sit down and stitch. So the first shout out I wanted to do is a congratulations to Catherine and Victoria from Neat and Not by the Sea for their 1 year Flosstube anniversary. Yeah, thank you for bringing joy to my life for the last year, and may there be many more videos to come. I also wanted to give a shout out and a thank you to Gracie Robles of Gracie Robles Cross Therapy. I really enjoy your Flosstube, and I wanted to thank you because at the end of your most recent Flosstube, you had a sort of credits reel almost of all the Flosstubes you've been enjoying watching recently, and I was absolutely gobsmacked and delighted to make that list. So thank you for showing me some love and welcoming me to this community. And yeah, I love your stitching, and I love the meaning behind your stitching and how you shared about how you stitched on some pieces while you were supporting your son when he was unwell. That was so heartwarming to hear, and yeah, your son's very, very fortunate to have you as his mum. I also wanted to give a shout out to a couple of Flosstubers in Ukraine who I think, you know, they're probably two of many, but they're two whom I've come across. And I think, yeah, it's great to give them some support and love in this time. So the first one is Cross Stitch with Luda. She's in Ukraine, and she stitches fabulous sort of mirabilia and dimensions kits. I really enjoy her Flosstubes. She gives them in both Russian and in English, so it's great if you want to sort of almost learn a language by watching her describe the same thing in two different languages. That's something I also love about Catherine at Neat and Not by the Sea, how she does her Spanish and her English ones. It's almost like a way to learn Spanish if you don't speak Spanish, or English if you don't speak English but you speak Spanish. But yeah, Cross Stitch with Luda, she's in the Ukraine and has a huge following, but has been posting some videos about what it's like in Ukraine at the moment. And I think, yeah, if you could go and give her a like or a comment of support, I think that would be great. And the other one is Cup of Stitches, who's Ukrainian and has been documenting what things are like for her and her family at the moment, and how cross-stitch is something that when she's able to put in a stitch or two, yeah, is helping her in the darkest circumstances I could imagine. I encourage you to think about ways that, yeah, you can help people in Ukraine through contributions of money to causes on the ground, and other contributions to other areas of the world where there are conflict, human rights abuses, minorities that suffer constant and persistent injustice and discrimination. So yeah, that's all I have to share with you today. Thanks for spending some stitchy time with me. I've really, having started this video feeling quite hesitant about whether I could be sort of up enough to create a video that you would enjoy listening to, this process has really cheered me up. So I want to give a heartfelt thank you to you for giving me the impetus to have this outlet. I mean, I think this is an important thing for me to document, whether I'm getting interaction or not. But every comment, every like, every interaction that I have with you on Instagram, on YouTube, really brings light and joy to my day. And I hope that this, in a small way, does that for you as well. So I'll see you soon. But until then, let's take each day one stitch at a time. Bye.